Oh my god, bro. My kids, bro, like for real? My, oh my god. Bro, my kids are going to be. Okay, calm down. My kids are gonna be incredible! I know this sounds weird because I'm 18. It sounds like I'm gonna have kids in like 2 weeks or something. No. I mean, first of all, the world is not prepared for me. But second of all, I don't know, 20 years from now, I don't know when will I have kids. But, bro, the world's not gonna be prepared. The world is not prepared. Why? Why is the world not gonna be prepared? Well, very simple. So right now I'm gonna talk about a concept, which is, I think, one of the most important things that any human being should learn, and that most people haven't learned, haven't understood, haven't even applied, which is the important thing. Okay? I think that's the primary thing, haven't applied. And the reason why I said my kids are gonna be great, or at least that's what I want. Get rid of them. I don't know. I don't want something for my kids. I just, as long as they're not criminals, I'm okay, right? Because obviously you gotta let them do whatever they want. You gotta let them have a lot of freedom. But within that freedom, I do want to set some bases, right, for them that I think are foundational for any human being to learn and are super valuable that I'm realizing now, right? One of those things is first principle thinking. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Okay? Let's talk about that. So I think the best example that I can give of a human being that has demonstrated the incredible value of first principles thinking is this guy, okay? Have you seen him? Have you seen him? Oh my god, my camera. Have you seen him before? Sounds familiar? Of course sounds familiar, bro. Of course, even more right now, even 2025. Like, if in 2022 most people didn't knew about him, well, let's just say that there were some things called elections in 2024. In that period, most people definitely started to know about this guy. But let's not talk about his ventures. Let's not talk about his side quests. Let's talk about one incredible tool, one incredible thinking tool that got him to where he's now, that got his companies, right, to where they are now. And that is first principles thinking. Okay? So what is this thing of first principles thinking? So basically, first principles is just a way, it's a mental tool, right? In which you can solve problem, right? So for example, I'm just gonna define it. Basically, you have a problem, you deconstruct it into its most fundamental truths, and then you reason up from there. Okay? That is basically it. So you take a problem, you break it down into its fundamental truths. So what are the fundamental truths? Based on what? Well, based on science, based on physics, right? Based on all these foundational subjects that humanity has come up to understand about the world in reality, and then reason up from there. Come to a solution from there, right? So let's give a great example. The example of his companies, right? SpaceX. I think SpaceX is one of the best examples for this. So before SpaceX and before SpaceX was starting to actually do some useful things for the world, rockets were really, I mean, thinking about it this way. It's like if you are driving a car and every time you use it, you just put it in the trash. Literally. Like you go from your home to another place and that's it. That car is useless now. If we lived in that world, cars would be expensive as hell. Not only that, it will be very inefficient. Like literally, you can use them one time and that's it. And that's pretty significant because cars will cost millions of dollars, probably. I don't know. That would be just not good, right? And that's basically what has happened with rockets for forever until Elon came in, right? And changed the whole game with reusable rockets, right? So the way he, obviously it was not only about first principle thinking, right? Obviously, there were a lot of variables in place that led to this actually becoming a reality because reusable rockets were something that were actually in the minds of all of these rocket scientists, right? Even way before SpaceX even existed. Obviously, and the reason why they never, or humanity never actually successfully achieved it until SpaceX came around is because it was very difficult, right? And that's what I'm saying. It's not This is not only about first principles. Obviously, there's a lot of variables involved that allowed SpaceX to be successful at all of this, right? At everything that it's doing. So obviously, an incredible team, right? An incredible group of brilliant engineers. Obviously, a great leader, which in this case was Elon, that set the vision, set the way to solve the problem, etc. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of variables involved, right? And I just want to focus in here. Just want to focus in first principles thinking because it is actually something that he utilized a lot to actually come up with these solutions, right? So I'm going to give you a very specific example in regards to the cost of rockets. So, to give it a little context, whenever he was starting SpaceX, you know, he didn't actually he wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start a company around rockets, blah blah blah. Like the first thing that he did was, hey, I got $180 million from the PayPal sale. So just for context, he was one of the co-founders of PayPal, and obviously they sold PayPal to eBay for $1 billion. He got 180 million, and obviously he started Tesla and SpaceX, right? But basically, he was like, okay, uh, I'm very interested in Mars. Let me check what NASA is doing around Mars. Oh, it's doing nothing. Well, I guess I'm gonna do something. How do I do something? Well, let's buy a rocket and then send a philanthropic mission to Mars for the public to be interested again on this, and therefore NASA actually take this seriously. That was literally at least based on what he says, right, publicly. Um, and that's what he did, right? He went to Russia, buy some missiles, well, rockets, right? Um, or try, because he didn't buy them. And basically, what he realized is like, bro, these rockets are expensive as hell. And then he was like, okay, what if we do it ourselves, right? And obviously, that's where first principles comes into place, because the opposite of first principles thinking is reasoning up by analogy, right? So, oh, what has people done already do? Like I don't know, for example, what has the industry already been doing for the last 30 years, right? For example, rockets, oh, it's not reusable, it's expensive rockets, like little uses them one time, they're gone forever, they're very expensive, blah blah blah. And then first principle thinking, you break that problem down, as I said, into its most fundamental truths, and you just start to reason from there, start getting solutions from there. I'm not gonna actually talk about like how he did it exactly because I don't even know. I haven't talked to him, but he basically worked like hell, pretty hard, with an incredible team to reason up from there to come to the solution, right? Another example is with Tesla, right? So batteries, right? So this is actually an example that he has said a lot, I think. So it's like, oh, the opposite of first principles thinking is like, hey, reason by analogy, right? So, oh, batteries have always been expensive, blah, 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 blah. And then when you think about it from first principles, it's okay, what is the fundamental truth from this? Okay, fundamental truth from this is, okay, what are the fundamental materials that a battery, is made of? Oh, it's made of this, and that. Okay, great. What is the price of that in the London Metal Exchange, which is literally an exchange to know the prices of materials, right? Primarily, as its name implies, metals. Oh, this indeed. Oh, okay. Let's actually think. Okay, how much will this cost? Oh, this costs this versus this, which I think the numbers. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it was like, I don't know, something, $60 or something. I don't know if it was per kilowatt hour or some unit like that, but it was like 60 something versus 600. That was obviously is way better. And obviously that's pretty useful because now you have something that's way cheaper. And then obviously there's other variables involved, which is obviously the manufacturing. How can you make it more efficient? Economies of scale, which even make it even way cheaper. But whatever. That's what I'm saying. It's just a great example of first principle thinking. And the reason why I'm actually recording this right now is because I just apply that type of thinking to some problem, which obviously is very small. It's basically nothing compared to the problem that he solved with rocketry or with batteries. But it's just a great example and a great, I guess, great reinforcement, great reminder of the importance of first principles thinking. And this is basically a problem which was in regards to, let's just give context. It was basically, hey, I want a program that helps me find a career, sorry, not a career, sorry, that helps me find the right university degree for me, right? So in my case, I already know what I'm interested in, but because university puts it, cuts it in half, it's like, oh, I'm interested in this, boom, like the university is like, boom, no, you need one. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Not only that, but I also want to like check out their options, right? And I think it's pretty valuable to just go for a program like that. And I was like, okay, it's not only about the program, but it's also about the person that guides you, right? The counselor. Because I basically, to give context, I was basically literally just called a counselor from a program. And I for the last week, I think I called other 2 or 3 counselors or other 2 or 3 companies that dedicate to this. And and basically what I have, my reasoning by analogy, basically is like, okay, what do I ask? Oh, what people normally ask, right? Oh, what's the cost? How many experience do you have? Blah, blah, blah. Things that everyone asks, right? And then right now I'm realizing, okay, wait a minute. So what do I actually want from this? Obviously, apart from the programs, is having an exceptional counselor. Because like in anything, there's gonna be, you know, great people, like A players and B players, like Steve Jobs said. There's gonna be A players in terms of being a counselor, B players in terms of being a counselor. So how do I find those A players? And that was the thing. Okay, how do I find it? Okay, boom, problem. We got to solve that problem. How do we solve that problem? Okay, let's think about it from first principles. And basically, I was like, okay, what are the fundamental truths that make a counselor exceptional, that makes a counselor great? Well, it's basically primarily 3. So the first one is that they're gonna be really good at knowing you, right? They're gonna be really good at knowing me, right? My personality, my interests, my experience, my skills, etc. 2, they're gonna be really good at knowing about the real world, right? This is not only about university, that's it. No, it's like about the real world, right? You gotta know about trends. What are the potential trends, right? How is technology gonna change whatever, or what is gonna be likely the change is gonna happen? Because obviously the future is uncertain, right? Or what has been like, I don't know, like basically the real world, know about it. And obviously that involves experience, right? That, the counselor in this case has experience, blah, blah, blah. Knows a lot of people that are actually in the trenches, if we can say it that way, in the real world, etc. And then the other pillar is the connection, right? How to bring something useful based on the data of me knowing you, or in this case, the counselor knowing me, and also from the data of the real world. And based on that, boom, create a solution. So that are like the fundamental truths, right? And also, when thinking about it, it's like, okay, for the first principle, which is okay, it's got to be someone that is really good at knowing about people, really know when assessing humans, right? Well, what is like the most closest profession, if we can say it that way? Well, it's like a psychologist, right? Someone that is in the field of psychology, or pedagogy, pedagogy, right? Well, I don't know. Because they are really good at knowing you, right? Or at least that's what we want to believe. No, for real, psychology, right? Okay, and then in the second part, that's a little bit more complex, right? Because we're talking about the real world, which has a lot of variables, and it's not there's not like a profession to know about the real world. It's not like, oh, psychology, right? It's got a lot of variables, blah, blah, blah. So I think in that case would be something one that is just exceptionally curious about learning about the real world, right? Talks to a lot of people, is constantly updating itself, and basically, when you're an exceptional, when you're exceptionally curious, you're just always going to be updating yourself, and you will always want to understand about the real world. You're always going to be talking with people to understand, blah blah blah. Okay, and then the third one, it really involves, if you really think about it, a lot of like systems thinking, right? So it involves, okay, we have these data sets. We have the data set. Okay, this person, what is it like? What are the skills? Based on all the psychometric tests that they have done, blah blah blah. Then what is the real world, blah blah blah. And as a counselor, quote unquote, in my I will need to be able to, you know, you know, systematically think or use systems thinking to be like, okay, how can I actually create a solution, right? Or actually, how can I create a hypothesis and then test it with the student, right? Or in this case, with me, the counselor, test that hypothesis that he creates with me and apply the scientific method, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna talk. I tell him, hey, I actually think is interesting insight, blah blah blah, or I don't think this is good, blah blah blah. And it's just an ongoing process, but whatever. And I think, based on these first principles that I'm talking, that's what makes an exceptional counselor, right? In this case, the last part, which involves a lot of system thinking, well, guess what profession, profession, I'm closing it, but basically what type of, human profession is very good at systems thinking? Well, an engineer, right? Any field in regards to engineering, like to hard engineering, like computer science, like, I don't know, mechanical engineering, even physics, like science, engineering, like all of those fields really allow you to develop systems thinking, right? And therefore, it's like, okay, so based on all of that, in order to get an exceptional counselor, I need to have I need to have a counselor that is exceptionally curious, that is, has really good and deep understanding of psychology, and not only that, but also has at least some experience with engineering, or at least with systems thinking. And therefore, you can actually start to filter people. So, for example, there's someone and this is literally the person who I just talked with. He was studying he got his university degree in computer science. So in that case, like, he developed systems thinking or whatever in 2003. And then for the past 14 years of his life, he has been dedicated to, in this case, the field of psychology and pedagogy, which is obviously what he's gonna help me with, or what he helps, people like me to discover, right? Um, and therefore, that, I think, is not that bad enough of an option, because, okay, we're thinking about it, and it's okay. So this guy has a background, clearly a background in computer science, and, based on his degree, even if it was his university, like the university, it's 4 years where you're like really constantly learning, blah 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 blah, and experiencing, and blah blah blah, blah blah blah, and therefore you really do develop that type of systems thinking. And not only that, but if the last 14 years you have been actually having that experience and developing this psychology, experience and knowledge, then it's great. So basically, from that, the conclusions and thinking about it from first principles, now we can actually start to think about the questions that are way more relevant, right? So, for example, I have some questions here around exactly that, right? Let me just pull it up because I don't find any questions. Oh my God, where are your questions, bro? So let's compare these questions to the ones that I was, you know, asking. Okay. Oh my God, where's this? Okay, here it is. So let's compare these questions. So, for example, let's talk about this question. Let me get rid of this. Yeah, for example, this question. So, what's a common piece of career advice you strongly disagree with, or what's a very popular safe major that you often advise students against? So, this one is basically a question that tests if they're an independent, unbiased thinker, right? If the counselor is independent, unbiased thinking. That's a very important question, right? Another question, right? Um, I'm really interested in your process. Let's say you're done with all the tests and one-on-one interviews. You now have a pile of data about me. Can you walk me through your literal next steps? How do you go from the raw data to a final curated list of 3 to 5 major recommendations? What tools do you use? How do you weight the different variables? That is obviously um, a much more a specific question, right? Then another question, right? So, for example, this one to test the principle number two, which is how they model the world, right? Oh, so what a university major or career path you become really excited about in the last 2 years, and you weren't recommending 5 years ago? What changed? So in this case, what we're listening for is to test if they're a constant learner, which is like the principle two that I talked about of constant being extremely curious, whatever, and therefore you can see if they are that based on that principle from that first principle thing that we talk about. This is another good question. So, for example, if we want to test how they model me, right? So, based on that principle that I thought I previously said. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is a really long one, but whatever. It's like, oh, let's say my psychometric test results come back and say I'm highly analytical, introverted, and a structural thinker. And the report's top recommendation is something like an accountant or like a librarian. But in our 101, I tell you that my real passion is building things, that I'm self studying some physics to understand the universe, and that my ultimate goal is to solve big, messy global problems. How do you handle the contradiction? What's more important to you, the objective test data or my subjective personal ambition? So, for example, that one is a really, specific question based on that first principle that I said of, okay, let's test, you know, based on that principle that I said of, okay, one of the principles that make an exceptional counselor is them being an exceptional and at knowing about you, right? At knowing you, and therefore that's what you're testing uh, with that question, right? So, for example, our bad answer will be like, oh, well, the tests are very accurate, or oh, you should be realistic, or oh, maybe you should can build things as a hobby, right? I don't know. But an exceptional answer will be, well, that's not a contradiction. That's a clarification. The test tells me how your brain is wired. You're an analytical, deep thinker. Your ambition tells me that where you can aim, and therefore we can throw out the accountant thing and instead look at highly analytical, deep work building fields that still are able to fulfill that ambition and also fulfill those skills that you have. Oh, this sounds like something that will be interesting for software engineering or systems thinking or whatever. So obviously that's like a test and like an example of an answer. And I mean, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to get here is look at how we got from the questions of, oh, what is your experience, to a question like the one that I just described before. Is pretty significant because the one of that I literally asked with these guys, like, what is your experience? Oh, 14 years, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay. And then you just finish there and then you're like, okay, what the fuck? But if you actually think it from first principles and then from that you start to derive these questions, you're gonna get way more valuable data in this case, way more valuable answers to be like, okay, so this one seems to be a really good a counselor, or this one seems to be not that great of a counselor, and you can start to filter the options, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I just wanted to give these very specific application of first principles just to demonstrate the fact that it can apply to anything. It can apply from solving this, or at least not solving, because at the end of the day, to solve it, you actually want to call, but I mean, it really helps in solving this problem, from really helping to solve this problem to really helping solve other problems, like revolutionizing rocket science, revolutionizing rocketry. Like, that's crazy because it can be literally anything. Bro, if you can use this to revolutionize rocketry and sustainable energy and electric vehicles, like how Elon did it, you can do anything. You can revolutionize anything. Now, obviously, this is a tool. You still gotta have way other tools or stuff in your arsenal to better solve the problems that you want to solve. But we gotta admit that this is a very valuable tool. And back to the beginning of this video that I was saying, oh, my kids are gonna be great. Because if you really teach your kids these tools, which obviously school doesn't teach it, or at least if they do, it's just not that great how they teach it. They're gonna be developing their brain with this kind of thinking tools, this type of thinking behavior, which, as we just demonstrated, is very valuable. And therefore, they're going to have more tools to solve whatever problem they want to solve, right? Even if they're going to be musicians. Like, bro, I just said it. It can apply to a lot of things. I mean, I haven't think about it how it can apply to being a musician, but like, you know the drill. Like, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, obviously, this is not the only tool. There's way more tools, like, for example, critical thinking, that are just absolutely essential for anyone to learn. That I just think are just essential, bro. Are essential. And I think this is an incredible tool that any human being should be. It says should, okay? I'm using the word should. I know that word is kind of like lame because you're forcing people, but like, I really do think that one should be taught to every single human. Because just think about it. Imagine how humanity will be if every single human actually had this deep understanding around this. Who knows? Because, bro, we have one human which really had a great understanding of it. And not only great understanding, but also had a great, incredible, exceptional application of it. And look what has happened. Just one human. Obviously, teams were involved around it, but that human was the one who assembled the teams, talking about Elon, right? So we got, bro, rocketry revolutionized literally the thing that people use when they want to describe something that's difficult. Whenever they say, oh, it's not rocket science, well, that was rocket science. What else? Electric vehicles. And then not only that, it's not only that. Sustainable energy. He's doing it with Neuralink. He's doing it right now with AI, with XAI and Grok. He's gonna do it human or robots. And that's just one human, right? Obviously, as I said, it's like thousands of incredible smart people, but if it wasn't for him, those thousands of smart people wouldn't be together solving that problem, right? So that's the thing that I'm saying. If that human was able to exceptionally understand this concept, and not only that, but exceptionally apply it, now imagine if way more people were able to do that, to exceptionally understand this concept and other way more concepts, but whatever. I'm just focusing on this one right now. And not only that, but also exceptionally apply it. They could apply to other problems. They could apply to build new things, and make humanity thrive even more. That would be a very interesting world. So yeah. And I also forget about talking about this, which is AI, right? So AI, this debate of whether it's actual real intelligence or not, it is definitely some form of intelligence. And why is AI relevant right now? Like with what I'm saying right now? Well, because you can literally ask a great model, which based on today's standards, a great model is something like Gemini 2.5, whatever, and tell him, hey, please help me out breaking this problem from first principles. It's obviously not going to give you a perfect answer. At the end of the day, it's a very different type of intelligence from the one that we humans have. but it's a type of intelligence, and therefore you absolutely can, and you absolutely no, not should, but I will really recommend to absolutely take advantage of this type of intelligence that we have to utilize this tool that I'm talking about, and boom, you have incredible things, right? Because like obviously before we, or at least these kind of things, these kind of tools, this kind of technology wasn't democratized as much as it is now. So before you actually needed to think about like these problems in first principles. Right now, you obviously need to think, but you can also direct an intelligent, I don't know, being, I shall say, something like that, to think and help you think about whatever in first principles. So that seems to be a very interesting use case of AI, to just literally be like, okay, let's think about it from first principles. And, it's not going to be great, but it's going to be pretty helpful. So, yeah, this is what I think about this as of today, November 2025. And I do think that everyone should know about this, everyone should use it. It will be pretty interesting to see how the world will be like if not only everyone used it, like everyone applied it. And I don't know, it's just one of those concepts that I think are foundational, and it's just very important. Very important. They're just incredibly useful. It's one of those, bro. It's one of those. Also, critical thinking is one of those. Right now I didn't have the time to talk about critical thinking, but it's also one of those. So yeah, right now it's literally 2 a.m. Bro, it's 2 a.m. Oh my God. 2 a.m. 2 a.m., bro. And to, for you to know that it's 2 a.m., I'm gonna 2 a.m. There's no, okay, it's 2 a.m. not in the evening. 2 a.m. in the morning. And I'm talking about this. I gotta go to sleep, probably. Yeah, that should be a pretty wise thing to do. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about this. Pretty cool, pretty valuable, and hopefully someone else watches this and also gets something from this. Peace.